हेलो। 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 हेलो।
On behalf of the Indian Institute of Foreign Trade, I welcome all of you once again to this first edition of Global Business Research Conference. Some of you have been with us from day one of the pre-conference, or you are joining us freshly today for this session. We are delighted to have all of you here today with us. So we are now set for a very special session, our plenary panel powered by CRIT, centered around a theme that could not be more timely: navigating economic disruptions, strategies for resilience. In an increasingly unpredictable world where geopolitical shifts, climate events, technological disruptions, and global trade tensions are rewriting the rules, resilience is no more a buzzword, but it is a necessity. This session brings together seasoned experts who have not just studied disruptions, but also have shaped strategic responses to them. It gives me great pleasure to introduce first the moderator of this session, Ms. Natasha Jha Bhaskar. She is Executive Director at Newland Global Group, Australia, a leading corporate advisory firm specializing in India, Australia trade and investment. She brings with her a global perspective on trade, investment, and international relations, and we are honored to have her steer today's conversation. With deep expertise in policy analysis, market intelligence, and bilateral trade strategies, she helps businesses navigate the evolving economic landscape between the two nations, India and Australia. Before her role at NGG, Natasha spent 12 years in the Indian Parliament, engaging in policy advocacy, legislative analysis, and global diplomatic forums such as SAARC, ASEAN, and BRICS. She has worked extensively on governance models, human capital development, and policy implementation across India. A prolific writer and commentator, Natasha contributes to the Business Today, Observer Research Foundation, and Channel News Asia, offering insights on trade policy, economic strategy, and India-Australia relations. She is frequently featured on SBS Australia, Australian Financial Review, ABC News, and Sky News. She holds an MA in Public Policy, University of Brunei Darussalam, as a Commonwealth Broadcast Scholar, and earned her bachelor's degree from Lady Shri Ram College, Delhi University, alongside a gold medal in mass communication from Jamia Millia. Passionate about fostering cross-border collaboration, Natasha is committed to reshaping narratives around India-Australia relations with data-driven insights and strategic engagement. Joining her on the panel are some of the eminent voices in trade strategy and policy making, and allow me to introduce them one by one. Professor Rakesh Mohan Joshi. Professor Rakesh Mohan Joshi is a distinguished academic author and expert in international trade and management, currently serving as Vice Chancellor of IIFT New Delhi. A recipient of multiple scholarships, he has trained at Harvard Business School, IIFT, Rajasthan University, and the National Dairy Research Institute, earning the IIFT Gold Medal for Academic Excellence. An acclaimed author, he has written international marketing and international business and served as editor of Foreign Trade Review and Focus WTO. He has led major research studies for the government and global organizations like the World Bank, ATP, UNCTAD, and APO. Professor Joshi has conducted executive training for IAS, IFS, IRS, and other government officials, as well as foreign diplomats. His expertise spans policy, trade, and business strategy with teaching, research, and consultancy across 30 plus countries, including the US, UK, Canada, China, Germany, and UAE. He has held key leadership roles, including chairman of the BIS Committee on Online Consumer Reviews and chairman of UGC's Committee on Foreign Education Institutions in India. He is also a management council member at IMA and served as visitors nominee for Delhi University and IIT Kanpur. Recognized for his contribution, Professor Joshi received the Atal Bihari Vajpayee Award in 2022 for lifetime achievement in economic research and a lot of other international accolades from LBS, London Business School. And he is a sought after speaker, policy expert, and media commentator, as he continues to shape trade policy and business strategy worldwide. Thank you, sir, for taking out the time and joining the panel. Now I will introduce Professor Pritam Banerjee. Dr. Banerjee is a leading expert in economic policy, trade facilitation, logistics, and international trade. He currently heads the Center for WTO Studies at the Center for Research in International Trade. With extensive experience spanning academia, public policy, and industry, Dr. Banerjee has previously worked as a logistics sector specialist consultant with the Asian Development Bank and served as Senior Director for Public Policy at Deutsche Post DHL Group. He has also held key roles at the Confederation of Indian Industry and the World Bank in Washington, D.C., focusing on trade policy and facilitation. Dr. Banerjee has been a member of several high-level policy groups, including the National Council for Trade Facilitation and the Ease of Doing Business Reforms Committee under the Ministry of Commerce. He actively contributes to trade and logistics discussions through roles at FICCI, TPCI, and other prominent industry bodies. A respected academic, he has served as guest faculty at institutions such as Foreign Service Institutes and IIFT as well. He holds a PhD in public policy from George Mason University and a master's in economics from Jawaharlal Nehru University. His research and writings on trade logistics and regulatory reforms are widely recognized. Thank you, sir. Thank you for joining the panel today. Now I would introduce our next panelist, Dr. S.P. Sharma. Dr. Sharma is a distinguished economist with a strong presence in both national and international economic arenas. He holds an MPhil in economics and a PhD in management from the prestigious Punjab University, Chandigarh. With over 27 years of experience in economic research and policy advocacy, he has worked with leading organizations including the Government of Punjab, Government of India, Associated Chamber of Commerce and Industry, PwC, Tata Capital, and PhD CCI, where he serves as Chief Economist and Deputy Secretary General. Throughout his career, Dr. Sharma has led numerous high-impact research studies and policy suggestions. His expertise spans key economic areas, including macroeconomy, trade, industry, and financial market. As a thought leader, he is a frequent speaker at national and international conferences and has actively participated in scholarly debates organized by academic institutions, research organizations, trade associations, and industry bodies. A respected academic advisor, Dr. Sharma serves on advisory and governing committees of prestigious education institutions. He is regularly invited by leading media outlets, including TV channels, radio, and print media, to provide expert insights on economic, industry, trade, and financial development. He is also a regular panelist on Market Mantra, the prestigious program of All India Radio. Dr. Sharma's deep understanding of economic trade, policy framework, and global trade dynamics makes his contribution invaluable to both industry and academia. So thank you for taking out time and joining us here today. Now I would introduce Professor Vishwajit Nag. Professor Nag is a professor in the area of economics and trade policy and is head executive management and development program at IIFT New Delhi. He served as a visiting research fellow at the Institute of Developing Economics in Tokyo and held the prestigious India Chair Professorship on behalf of the Indian Council for Cultural Relations in Ukraine. He has earlier worked with United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and Asia and Pacific in Bangkok. He is also a non-resident fellow of Center for Development Economics and Sustainability at Monash University, Australia. He has teaching experience in Tanzania, Germany, Ukraine, and Estonia. He is also one of the advisors on Global Value Chain for ArtNet, a trade research network promoted by the UN. Dr. Nag has completed a number of projects for the Government of India and international agencies such as World Bank, Asian Development Bank, United Nations, WTO, Department for International Development, etc. Dr. Nag is an accomplished author, having written 3 books and edited 2 more. His research expertise covers a broad spectrum of areas, including international business, market strategy development, consumer behavior studies, global value chains, trade and technology, regulatory aspects of international business, e-commerce, SME development, trade and development, encompassing critical aspects such as employment, gender, and the environment. Thank you to all the panelists to join us today here. Now, I would request both the conveners, Dr. Preeti Tak and Dr. Ashish Gupta, on stage to welcome all our guests with planters. Planters, because just like ideas, best thing grows when nurtured. With that, I now hand over the session to Ms. Natasha Jha Bhaskar to take the conversation forward. Over to you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone, for setting the scene ahead and also for a very kind introduction. I must congratulate Preeti and the whole team, as well as Professor Joshi, for initiating this important conversation today and for initiating this important conference, which I understand is being held for the first time, and we look forward to more international partnerships going forward. In that spirit, good morning, everyone, for joining us. It's a pleasure to welcome you all in today's session on navigating economic disruptions, strategies for resilience. Now, as we know, isolated countries, fragile economies, and an inward-looking world, we find ourselves at turbulent crossroads. Markets that once followed somewhat predictable patterns are now in a constant state of flux. Volatility has become the norm, whether driven by trade wars, geopolitical realignments, or the unexpected impact of black swan events. The very landscape we are here to explore seems to be shifting beneath our feet. We are living in what's often described as a VUCA world: volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. One day we are dissecting rising tariffs and shifting supply chains. The next day we are bracing for the impact of economic decoupling, energy security concerns, or the sudden recalibration of trade partnerships. Now, just 2 days ago, the Trump administration declared 25% tariffs on vehicles and auto parts imported into the US by other nations, as well as reciprocal tariffs, which are designed to match the import duties placed on US goods and services, and is planning to impose new fresh tariffs on April 2nd, a day which President Trump has called US's Liberation Day. Now, this is primarily viewed as a culmination of his America First trade policy, but it's all underscoring how rapidly the global trade landscape is evolving and is creating that fear among all of us. So let's try and explore what this all means for us as a country and what this all means for our global engagement. And as we know that volatility brings its challenges, it also brings opportunities for those with sharp insights and adaptive strategies. So we'll try and understand and deep dive into the latest research and data, equipping ourselves not just to navigate the complexity, but also how do we thrive in this environment. For the purposes of a focused discussion, we'll divide this conversation across 4 key themes. The first one is geopolitical shifts and global trade realignments, the shifting trade landscape. The second one is economic resilience through policy, infrastructure, and reforms. The third theme is around technology and digital trade as shock absorbers. And the fourth one on sustainability and climate resilient growth. Our first theme is geopolitical shifts and global trade realignments, and as we are witnessing a fractured kind of setup. My first question to you, Professor Joshi, you have witnessed this space for long, for decades and decades. What is it that's worrying you about all that we are witnessing in the environment today, and what is it that's a comfort when you witness it as an economist?
Thank you so much. I think, thank you so much. Thank you so much. First, I think, let me thank, each one of you. Natasha has come from Australia. Thank you so much for being with us. She has been brightest of the bright. I know her for decades. She worked in the media in TV channels where she used to host the biggest of the big. I'm a very small fry. So thank you so much for being with us. Then we have got, stalwarts, SP Sharma ji, Dr. SP Sharma. He has been the chief economist. She has already introduced with the Plenary Chamber of Commerce. And two of my own colleagues, Dr. Preetam Banerjee is in the forefront of this entire tariff war, who is working, 24/7 to prepare the India's response. And Dr. Biswajit is a very, very eminent, economist who has got his own views. You may disagree with him, but no two intellectuals. Thank you so much in this trade war. Trade was something which was always kept of the war. Now, trade war is a very important thing. Businesses, normally business people don't fight. Now, India, the best business community is either Gujaratis or Marwaris, and they are the people who keep away from war. So, listening the word that trade is war, amazing. Tariff as a weapon. First time the whole world is listening. And I've also said that even the currency is also being used as a weapon. Never heard it. And therefore, the other thing which we have heard is, I always say that, yesterday these people had a networking dinner. You make networking, so you make friends. But probably the time has come that you should be more afraid of the friends than the foes. As the, most powerful man on the earth used to say that both friends and foes are exploiting. And therefore, the first country which was targeted was Mexico and Canada. We were talking so far, that India could not do much in export and growth because we are not part of a global value chain. We have got logistics expert who always said global value chain, and the most complicated and delicate value chain which I think we created was the NAFTA chains within European Union. So NAFTA chains, an engine is to be, uh, to manufacture or an automobile is to be manufactured, it goes to Mexico and Canada 5 to 10 times. Chain disrupted. The FTA basically, the basic concept of FTA was trade creation and trade diversion. Trade was created because things could move. So manufacturing took place that way is absolutely going. Or has gone because 25% on Mexico, 25% on Canada. And I think my friends in economics, all of us have been come, like MSN. MFN is most favored nation. Most favored is not favoring a nation, but not to discriminate. And therefore, everything you say, you increase the tariff, decrease, you can do this, you cannot do this, he will go into the WTO. Now, WTO not now, for last more than decade, it is the dispute settlement body is dysfunctional. Now Donald Trump has done it, it is much before. And B is MFN has gone 25% on you, then you impose 10% of China, then 10% more, then others are threatened, you do not know, tariffs as a, again you said as a weapon, we impose the tariffs. So don't worry, we are living in a very predictable world. The only prediction today is unpredictability. We are in a very certain world and only certainty is uncertain. We do not know what is going to happen. The economists do a lot of calculation. We are using all our models, but these models don't take care of the geopolitical things. Models don't take care of, the fentanyl going from this place to other place, or immigrants going, and if you put army for immigrants, then FTA is okay. And tariff is okay. So I think the thing geopolitical, therefore you talk is more complex and it's going to be reality. I am sure that this conference, we had a lot of researchers from across who deliberated upon multiplicity of the topics. They have come out with their research, and we are discussing, complementarity and how to make our research models, relevant and on it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Joshi. Professor Banerjee, you just heard Professor Joshi saying that uncertainty is the only certain reality in the world that we are living in. Now, as the head of Center for World Trade here at IIFT, you have a tough job, because you're constantly trying to understand and, in a way, decipher what's happening, but also identify the key solutions. From your perspective, are we really in a difficult environment today, or we've always been in this difficult environment? It's just that we need to identify new strategies to address what's changing very constantly.
Thank you very much for that question. So, first, as Dr. Joshi said, no two intellectuals agree. So, let me start with a brief disagreement that trade has always been about war, starting from millennia, really. I mean, we are in this country called India, and we know about a certain company called East India. And that was entirely about geopolitics and trade coming together. And it's always been the case, even going back, if we consider the fact that the Second World War was about resources, the US Civil War was about cotton taxes. So, tariffs, trade policy, and war have always been interlinked with each other because economics, at the end of the day, is about entities fighting over scarce resources and opportunities. That's always going to lead to conflict. But having said that, let me try to first put a few things in context. In 1990, at the end of the Cold War, we were in a unique situation historically where you had one country which was overwhelmingly dominant economically and politically, which led to a situation where a certain consensus of a system could be developed. And that was the way around consensus, with the rules that came around it. At any point of time when that got disturbed, there was always a possibility of these rules being challenged. So the first rule that is being challenged is the concept of MFN, which means you treat every country the same. You don't discriminate between countries. Discrimination is allowed only through the so-called Article 24 of the GATT, which says that if I have a free trade agreement with another country, I can treat them better. So as Dr. Joshi rightly mentioned, the MFN is a bit of a misnomer. It's not the most favored nation. It's equal treatment, non-discrimination. But I can discriminate and give preferences to my FTA partners. So that's the ecosystem we have lived with for now close to 30 years. But this was already under challenge since I think President Trump gets a lot of flack. But the first salvo against the WTO system came from President Obama. And if you start reading the literature that was emanating out of Washington, D.C. in 2011, 2013, everybody there, the economists in Brookings, in Carnegie, and all the big think tanks, were questioning this consensus. Why? Because in the first 10 years after China joined the WTO, the competition that China was giving was to countries like India, Brazil. It was these countries that were losing market share or opportunity in third country markets. Because that were the kind of products China was focusing on, largely labor intensive, low technology goods. Around 2011-12, that starts to change. China now moves up the value chain, they're doing more tech-intensive products, and they're directly challenging the dominance in those sectors where European Union, US, etc. are the big players. So obviously the threat now comes home and the narrative changes, and that's where we are. Just quickly on the chronology of what happened. So we have the attack on the dispute settlement mechanism, which essentially makes the WTO much less effective. And then in 2018, we have the first round of tariffs from Trump's first administration against China. Focus was primarily China. Then we have the COVID pandemic, which exposes the fact that if you have close to 30% of global production across different products in one country, then you're putting all your eggs in one basket, and what we logisticians call the whiplash effect can completely stymie all kinds of value chains. So we start hearing this concept of China plus one. Then as this China plus one intensifies, we have now Trump 2, and we have this challenge to the existing WTO order. So nothing is happening in isolation. None of this is a surprise. It's a continuation of events that started a decade ago, and which people were discussing for a very long time. None of this was unexpected. So then let's come to what is it for India, and I'll stay there, and I'll give a very general overview because we're not certain what's going to happen. And this is my personal point of view, so please treat it as that. It's not, representative of any institution. Did India benefit from the Uruguay round? Yes, to an extent we did, but it's also true that we lost a lot of market share, which we potentially could have had there been free and fair competition. So this whole narrative about not the world not having fair competition because there's one behemoth of a country which is a non-market economy using everything at its disposal to grab market share is also probably negatively impacting India's own prospects. So the WTO as it stands today and the global architecture as it stands today probably needs to be reviewed. I'm not suggesting what's happening is the right way to do it, but it was up for a review anyway. Now, what's going to happen now? If what Liberation Day exercise becomes true, and we have this effective attack on the MFN principle, which basically means every country gets a different reciprocal tariff, then how we fare will depend on two factors. A, whether or not we get a reciprocal tariff, and the reciprocal tariff on India, is it higher or lesser than the other countries? So we know for a fact it's going to be lesser than China. I mean, I think one can be 99% sure because they've already got 2 rounds of tariffs imposed on them, and whatever reciprocal tariff will be imposed on them will be above and beyond. So India's tariffs will be lower than China. So that gives us an advantage in the US market, which will remain in the medium term the world's largest consumer market. It's 18% of my exports. The second is what happens to the other countries. Will they get a lower tariff than me or higher tariff than me? That will play out. Or we don't get reciprocal tariffs. Then it's actually a good thing for us because then only China has around 20% tariffs and I don't, which helps me get market access advantage. So I'm not speaking like the Marwari and the Gujarati, not like an economist, because I'm looking at purely the economic advantage I will have in the US market. Right? So that's one perspective. But the broader perspective is as Dr. Joshi mentioned, US starts looking into other areas of what they term as unfairness. They are terming indirect taxes like GST and VAT in countries like India and EU as essentially unfair. What does that mean? What policies will they come out with to counter it? They have even extended this to services. And I end here with this point that it is not being discussed much because we are so over focused on tariffs and goods. And I am a person who grew up in the late 80s and 1990s, and I saw the urban transformation in this country. The Noidas, the Bangalores, the Hyderabad, the Chennai's come up in front of my eyes. What was the single most important catalyst of that revolution? It was the IT-enabled services export. And our cross-border services exposed to the United States, and US is by far my biggest market for that activity, is critically important. And now I have a second huge opportunity coming up in form of the global capability centers. It is taking the ITES beyond IT. It involves a large number of occupations, management, finance, analytics, research and development in natural sciences. A lot of activities are being done in these GCCs, and it's all cross-border delivered, right? It's mode one, as we call it in trade parlance. So if eventually there are impediments or barriers that emerge in this sector, that will impact hopefully my second middle class revolution, which will deepen the first one. So it's just not about goods, let's also not forget services. So yes, it's a very uncertain world, but I think we need to navigate this uncertainty with a very strong focus of what my interests are. My interests are to ensure that my tariffs, even if they hit me, I at a lower end, and whatever I need to do to make sure that happens, I need to do, and I need to preserve my currently very open markets in cross-border services. If I have done both of these, then I have taken care of the first option.
There's quite a bit that you have raised there, Professor Banerjee, and I'll come back to you because the whole issue of reciprocal tariffs, and there's currently a lot of debate on how feasible it is to really create that administratively an ecosystem to address how you can have a reciprocal tariff with a particular country vis-a-vis, which is not actually affecting the other country. So how do you, to your point, how do you address this in a manner which is fair to each and every country, and the tangible and the intangible component also, the non-tariff barriers, how do you address that, and how this impacts the consumers? because consumers sit at the center of all of this. And the ambition is great, filling that gap of $1.3 trillion of the trade deficit, which US is aspiring to do by all of this. But how do we address this? Dr. Sharma, we've heard from Professor Banerjee, we've heard from Professor Joshi. If we just talk about what's happening in the US and Europe, as advanced economies, they're experiencing significant slowdowns. And now, how, in your opinion, and you're dealing with industry on a regular basis, how this global deceleration, in your opinion, is affecting India's export sector?
Yes, Natasha, thank you. And I thank Dr. Professor Ram Joshi for inviting me to express my connotations, my viewpoint about India's resilience and India's participation in the global trade. India, as you mentioned, that resilience. Actually, we started our resilience from our green revolution. Our resilience started from the 60s or 70s. Then we supported our resilience with the LPG model, globalization, privatization, and liberalization in 1991. Again, with the recent policy reforms of Make in India, then Atmanirbhar Bharat and PLI scheme, and so many supporter schemes, Startup India, all these schemes. So how India, with such reforms, starting from the Green Revolution to the recent reforms of PLI, performed in the global charts. India's resilience started after the 1991 reforms. We were very slow in the 1950s, 60s, 70s. Then we were steady after the 1991 reforms. Then fast after 2000. Now we are the fastest growing economy in the world economic system. So if we go by the numbers, how the reforms supported the trajectory of our statistics, I would like to mention three major numbers of 1991. Our exports were less than $20 billion. Our GDP was less than $300 billion. And our stock market was less than 1%. Sensex was trading at 999 on 1st January 1991. So these numbers now, after the 35 years of great reforms, are performing well. Our exports are $778 billion, and our GDP is now touching $4 trillion. For the current year, we will be more than $4 trillion in the next FY 25-26. And our exports are becoming robust, and this year we are expecting that we will be an $800 billion export economy by the end of this financial year. So reforms provided the results, reforms are visible, and resilience is also visible. Like our exports at the time of Lehman crisis were $230 billion in 2007. After 7 years, our exports were touching $470 billion in 2014. But because of some trade war, as mentioned by Professor Dhar, also Professor Joshi, that trade wars are not in favor of anyone. So we were able to only add only $100 billion in those 7 years from 2014 to 2020. Exports were at around $560 billion. But the last 3 years are showing a great resilience. Starting from 2021 to 24-25, we have added $300 billion in our export trajectory from 530 to around $800 billion for the current. So with the reforms, with the numbers, we are becoming more robust. As US again creating trouble, like imposing the tariffs, so we have many alternatives also, because trade is a great advantage, and trade is for the creation of welfare of the people. So as I represent the industry body, so our focus, our industry is looking at many other alternatives like the Middle East and the ASEAN countries, then we have Latin American markets and the African countries. So India is not only dependent on the advanced economies, we are significantly diversified during the last 7-8 years with the support of reforms, with the support of great hand-holding provided by the government. And like we consider China, that China is creating competition and China is becoming more and more dominant in the global market. But during the recent years, the dominance of China is also receding. If I go by the numbers of the last 7-8 years, in our import trajectory, our imports from the world were higher than China. Our imports from the world were growing at around 8%, but from China, the growth was only 4.5 or 5%. So we are diversifying not only the export trajectory, but the imports also. We are finding the new friends, those who are price friendly and providing the goods at low prices. So going forward, how to tackle this problem of trade war? If we consider the last trade war, which happened in 2017-18 between China and US, we replaced China as our largest trade partner. US became the largest trade partner in 2017-18 and 19, and now US is the largest trade partner with $190 billion trade in goods and services. So, how to build further reforms, how to enhance this trajectory of resilience in the coming times? As I represent the industry body, there are 5-6 factors which are impacting the competitiveness of our manufacturers or our exporters. Firstly, the cost of doing business is still very, very high. And there are 5 major costs which are impacting the price cost margins of the producers and their competitiveness in the international market. Otherwise, we have a robust growth trajectory in the coming times. These costs are firstly the cost of financial, that is apparent that our interest rate is significantly high as compared with many economies. Then the cost of power, cost of compliances, and the cost of logistics. These costs are major costs which impact the competitiveness or the performance of our manufacturers in the domestic market or the exporters in the international market. So we are trying a lot and we are representing our issues to the government, and they are listening, and the result is some reforms like the compliances have been reduced. More than 42,000 compliances have been simplified during the last 3-4 years. So going forward, we have suggestions that ease of doing business must happen at the factory level. We have improved a lot at the macro level from 142 to 63, but that should happen particularly at the factory level also, so that the ease of doing business is visible in the factories. So these are my suggestions, and we look forward that the reforms trajectory continues and we are becoming more and more robust in the global economic charts.
Thank you, Dr. Sharma. And if I have to add, working in the Australian ecosystem, we have actually seen Australian businesses showing a lot of interest in the Indian market. And this has actually happened most specifically in the last 5 years. So as we are talking about trade war, I must say that at times someone's loss is someone's gain, and Australia's relationship with China, when it actually hit its nadir in 2020, and China's belligerence really affected the relationship. It was a gain for India. The Australian government did a very focused analysis of its relationship with the Indian economy, and they wrote a 500-page India economic strategy, which actually identifies 10 states and 10 sectors where Australian businesses must engage with India. And since then, we've also seen a reciprocal report from India, which is the first of its kind for a country about engaging with the Australian economy. So it's kind of interesting because all the conversation around diversification, around supply chain resilience, centers around how it impacts one country against the other. One country's gain is another country's loss. And if I have to bring you there, Professor Nag, in my experience interacting with Australian businesses, there's a lot of issue around protectionism in India. And a lot of them have, visited India possibly in early 90s or in early 2000s, and they still hold on to that perception, thinking that India is a difficult market to do business in. Having said that, we are in the middle of negotiating a free trade agreement. We have done an Indian trade agreement called the Economic Cooperation Trade Agreement, and now we're looking at full-fledged CETA. In your opinion, where do we strike a balance as a country when it comes to self-reliance and then economically integrating with the larger scenario? How do we communicate a message saying that we are ready to do business, we are ready to globally integrate, but of course it has to be reciprocal, but we are equally self-reliant, because it still seems for many foreign businesses that we are very protectionist, we're still not ready to do this.
Thank you. I think you have put a lot of questions in one basket, so let me just try to answer it. First of all, let us try to understand the difference between resilience and redundancy. Because whenever I interact with the companies, I think there is a lot of concern about resilience. Resilience is defined as how quick you are coming back. So the time is very important in the definition of resilience. And redundancy is basically when you are not able to become so resilient, how actually you are putting your production center in other countries, so that when the time comes, actually you can just pick up the business from other areas. For example, Indian pharmaceutical sectors are having the production centers in Russia or in South Africa or something. Whenever it is required, you pick up the materials from South Africa. Whenever it is required, you work from Australia. So if one supply chain is disrupted, the other supply chain is affected. And the definition of resilience actually originally was designed against a natural disaster. And there's a very famous case study about Toyota's resilience after tsunami. So companies are trying to look into this particular aspect. Now, having said that, when you are looking at from a country's perspective, that was your question, whether the country is able to look into a different or promote a different supply chain base for the benefit of their own domestic industry is a very important question. Just few days back, I was interacting with someone and I got few interesting statistics. And one of them is something like that. We are noticing in last 1.5 years, the Chinese investment in Vietnam and Indonesia will right? And just 2 days back for a public lecture, I was just looking into US Census Bureau's data of monthly imports of US country-wise. And then there's an interesting statistic I found out that month by month, when I was comparing 2022, 23, and 24, I found in 24, the first 12 months increased in US imports of significantly. So what is happening? Some countries are actually creating large inventory in USA. Okay, assuming that or having a full idea or prediction that something is going to be wrong in 2025. And just one statistics I'll tell you that you can understand the extent. In January 2023, the US import trade deficit was around $66 billion month. In 2024, it was around $69 billion. And in 2025, January, as the latest data available in the US, in January 2025, it is $131 billion. So it is almost like a double. So I can assume that China is actually creating large inventory and they are doing it very systematically there. So the answer to your question is that, of course, when Chinese companies are doing it, Chinese government is supporting it. So can a country support another country's growth through the investment and creating or helping their companies to go and set up business? And so this is an FDI outflow. So that kind of system is basically will be able to see. The second question about that, what kind of trade cooperation actually we can now think of. Bilateral trade agreement we're just looking at the trade part of it. We're not looking at the production part. So if there is already a global value chain, so in those cases, how actually you are helping or how you are actually creating a setup in which the global value chain remains intact at the same time, the trade operates. If you increase the MFN tariff rate or if you just slap the other country with some higher tariff rates, the entire supply chain, the back is getting disrupted. So even some countries, suppose some countries are supplying, Vietnam is supplying material to China, and China is exporting to USA, and US putting up 25% to China, and Vietnam is also affected, right? So is it possible that the Chinese production system is shifting to Vietnam? So this is a big question. This question depends on the absorption capacity of the small country, whether they will be able to develop that kind of production system, what China is having, and whether India as a country can take care of it. And already Dr. Sharma has mentioned about ease of doing business and different kinds of logistics costs. So this is a high time we must work on it and try to inform the others that we are able. The last sentence, sometime back, a Japanese investor told me, and I quote, entering China is very easy. Doing business in China is very difficult. Entering in India is very difficult, but doing business within India is very easy. So the perception of the investors needs to be changed. That we have certain reasons for which entering into India is difficult, but once you are inside, then it is much better as compared to China.
Absolutely, and I think it's a perfect segue also for me to talk about a project that we are working on with the Indian Institute of Foreign Trade on case studies, because there is a sincere lack of understanding which businesses have actually done well in the market and how they have navigated the Indian complexity. So both IIFT and Newland is working on a case studies compendium where we are actually exploring which Australian businesses have done well in the Indian market, and also Indian businesses, the legacy that they have created, the Tata, the TVS Motors, the APG Group, and several others, and the benchmarks that are set, the metrics which are there for us to assess, and the policies that have helped us. So the project will actually be finishing end of this year, and we look forward to launching. So I think these are examples which will further create that ecosystem for businesses to understand and take this forward. But primarily with my vested interest in the bilateral Australia-India trade and investment space, I think I try and bring a lot of this conversation around this reality. But moving on to the key point that you made, Professor Inag, on building that the trade logistics, and that's very central to building economic resilience in the country. Looking at trade logistics, looking at infrastructure modernization. Now, from that perspective, Professor Banerjee, if I have to bring you here, what policy interventions do you think we have seen and is really are we there yet when it comes to trade logistics and the infrastructure? Or there's a lot of work that still needs to be done at a global scale when you look at other countries? Because there's a lot of claim that's currently happening from India that we are right there, but is it in reality, do we really, on the ground, it's really changing the perception for businesses when it comes to trade logistics and infrastructure?
Thank you for that question. It's an interesting one because, as you rightly pointed out, we have had made significant improvements over the last decade or so. The question is the yardstick, right? So we have improved significantly from where we were, but have we improved relative to our competitors? So, the cost of doing business overall, and I link logistics overall to the cost of doing business that Dr. Nag was mentioning. Now, let me first list a few things that have happened. The first one was, to an extent, catalyzed by the WTO trade facilitation agreement, which, as a member state, India also was a party to, and that led to certain reforms specifically focused on customs procedures and associated wider agencies that are responsible for the import and export processing. Right? So these are procedural reforms. But that's just one part of the trade process. You have the hard logistics infrastructure. You have the turnaround time at ports, the ability for hinterland transportation to be low cost and timely, and all of that. So that is a bigger agenda. The government realized that there's a bigger agenda, and then two other projects were launched. One is the Prime Minister's Gati Shakti, which is essentially infrastructure planning targeted towards not just trade but overall in economic efficiency. There is a national logistics policy which looks into all the policies around logistics, not just at the gateway, at the port and the airports, but inside. So a lot of that and digitalization has also brought in a lot of procedural reform. So things are much better than maybe a decade ago. But is India still at the cutting edge compared to its competitor countries? To an extent, that is a work in progress. It will be an unfair claim to say that India has become very good, good enough to compare with, let's say, Malaysia or the coastal areas of China. But I always read in China because India and China are in fact comparable. I cannot compare India with a Singapore or Malaysia. They're, in geographical size, otherwise very different. If you look at the industrial geography of China, 80% of it is in the coastal areas. If I took a straight line from the coast and it's 100 kilometers, and that's where it ends. That's where all of their export-oriented industries are, with some exceptions. If you look at India's industrial geography, you have a huge cluster here around NCR, Punjab, Haryana, Western UP. You have Gujarat, you have Maharashtra, you have Tamil Nadu. Our export-oriented industries, in fact, are doing best when they're close to a port, which again goes on to show that my hinterland transportation infrastructure is not good enough. There are many projects which are ongoing in India. These things take time. So the dedicated freight corridor, the multimodal logistic parks, they've all been announced, but they're still not on the ground yet. So all of those will, of course, once they come around, will take time. But the last point I would like to make is I think we don't appreciate is that we are a federal system, which means that a lot of the reforms that need to happen, especially in the factors market, and this goes beyond logistics, and what Dr. Nag was mentioning. Why is it difficult to start something in India? Not just for a foreign investor. This is true for anybody, even Indian entrepreneurs. You have to acquire land. There are a large number of clearances around not just acquiring that land, but making it, acceptable for commercial activity. There are a number of regulations around getting the utilities, labor. I won't go into the laundry list. But there are about, depending on whose calculation or estimation they're looking at, between 850 to 1370 different approvals you need to have before you start a factory. A vast majority of them are actually with the state. And that's where nudge economics comes into play. The government has been playing around with that. Rank states, link funding on infrastructure to reforms. These have only started 4 or 5 years ago, still time to socialize. Last point, the important one, is that the other big missing ecosystem is that when we planned industrial cities, we only planned for the economic part of it, the production part of it. It was not a city as such. We did not plan for urban transport. We did not plan for housing. And I stay in Gurgaon, and I've seen that city grow in front of my eyes. Today, even in the extended, so most factories have moved to Manesar and beyond. So it's no more in the immediate vicinity of Gurgaon. But even if I go in the stretch between Manesar and Mira, which is where the factories are, it's very difficult for a person who's working in these factories to find housing at a reasonable cost. If he does find that housing at a reasonable cost, it will be about 20 kilometers away. So, and there's no proper urban transport. So these teething problems, I was in the industry for a long time and I had clients from Korea and Japan, and these were the pain points. These seem like very minor issues, but they actually add up to a lot. And that's one very interesting thing that happened in the last budget, is that there have been 2 or 3 initiatives that have been announced on industrial housing, on urban transportation, which I think will go a long way to address some of those missing gaps.
Right, so possibly a seamless approach to doing business also, and really ensuring that the whole ecosystem is in place rather than just making those ad hoc kind of announcements and measures. And in fact, there's been a big improvement, especially from when it comes to the doing business ecosystem. We heard Dr. Sharma, we heard Professor Banerjee, and to your point of attracting investments, the competitive cooperative federalism model in itself, and we've seen so many states now trying to attract investment. In fact, a lot of my clients ask me which state to go to because now they're confused whether they should go to UP or Tamil Nadu or to Rajasthan or to Karnataka, possibly understanding which sector is doing well where. Now, Professor Joshi, your assessment of the reforms, which way it is going, and when we compare this globally, where do we stand and how far we need to go to really make it more competitive?
So I am very optimistic. I am very optimistic about India. India has got, a surprising capability to turn challenges into the opportunities. Like the largest number of people in COVID-19 died in America and not in India, which was surprising. India has got a surprising ability to be the pharmacy of the world. 38% of the generic medicines imported in America comes from India. And when India stopped, some restriction during the COVID, the whole country was in trouble. When it comes to reforms in 1990, which took place, the reforms took place under a very, typical situation when we had to mortgage our gold to, outside the country. And when you look into the exports, I think India's share in 1984-83, which was 0.4% in exports, it was only after reform that it came to 1% and then 1.8%. And if you see for last 10 years, India's share in world export is 1.8. This is, when it comes to the infrastructural reform, it is amazing. I think it has been, 10 trillion rupees or 12 trillion rupees by the central government, equal amount by the state government, never before have been spent on infrastructure. It is another thing which we have done is, what Dr. Banerjee and Bisjit was talking about, the states. States not competing, India is a real democratic federal this thing. We in exports also, we have started getting the data for a state, and not only that, we have gone to the extent that district as an export hub. We have also had that the scheme of ODOP, one district, one product. We also had a scheme as far as the export is concerned. The states were asked 10 years before to have their own export plans. All states were asked to make presentations, and then amount was distributed to them. And then we have gone much below. Now we say every district needs to have an export plan. So we are on a very sound footing when it comes to infrastructure, very right. And when you talk to comparing in China, infrastructure is difficult, but let me tell you about China. India's share in the global manufacturing is 3.8%. China's share in the world manufacturing is 38%. India accounts for 18% of the world population with 3.8% of our share. So it is, manufacturing is 4 times less than the population. In China, manufacturing is double the population. And if you see, the next 9 countries, their share in manufacturing is less than only China's share in manufacturing. China's share in world exports is 14.5%. India's share in world export is 1.8%. And another thing also we need to understand about is amazing figure. China this year had a trade surplus of about $1 trillion. America had a trade deficit of 1.2 trillion. Only thing is, some great economists who got Nobel Prizes convinced the mightiest man on the earth that the only solution to problem in America is put tariffs by great research. But I am sure that The whole concept of global supply chain was to take advantage of, the resources, not only the human resources, financial resources, but also the infrastructure resources which are competitively available. And what we talk about the IT has made, available or enabled, IT services to be exported. Now, export is one, but more than that, we talk of migration. Trump is saying illegal migration, but what about the digital migration? What about the immigration on the net? What about the services which passed on, say, a professor from India is taking a class in America and getting royalty? What about that? Can you catch that? So India, America, the majority of their import is in is on non-manufactured IT digital import rather than the physical import. So this is one, and on this, India is on a very strong footing. And what Dr. Banerjee talks of, we are talking of the global capability centers. And not only the government, but people in this country, the states, the entrepreneur, I'm sure they'll find out a way, and India is going to emerge. Like we emerged in crisis in 1991, from our share from 0.4% in trade increased to 1.8%. There was no calamity came in the last 10 years. This calamity has come, and I am sure it will not only make India resilient, but our share from 1.8% would increase multifold in time to come. It is providing us opportunity for the reforms. Like America is being criticized for increasing the tariff. The tariff in America is likely to increase. Pre-World War II tariff is 18% or so, never before. So if we increase the tariff, all studies in the FTA shows that there are two. One is the product which goes for consumer consumption, and the imports which goes for the manufacturing. So import which goes for manufacturing consumption at a lower tariff makes your industry more competitive. So I think India would emerge, as a resilient, as a part of, and overcome this challenge. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Joshi. And I think even in terms of setting up our goal of 2047 Viksit Bharat, all these reforms and all the aspirations actually come into existence. Now, when we talk about resilience, no conversation can be complete about, when we talk about technology and digital adoption in India, as well as digital trade as shock absorbers. And as we know that AI-driven predictive analytics, blockchain-powered trade finance, and digital customs is redefining efficiency and transparency in the trade sector. Now, Dr. Sharma, fintech and digital infrastructure, especially in India, has played a very strong role when we talk about efficiency and bringing in transparency. How do you see this progressing when, in terms of going forward when we talk about addressing the vulnerabilities that comes with these trade shocks?
Yes, Natasha, digital adoption is very, very high. And again, I would like to mention some robust numbers of the digitalization, as we are the highest growing economy in the adoption of digitalization. And in 23-24, the contribution of digital economy, digitalization was 10% in the GDP, which is going to be doubled in the next 2-3 years by 26 or 27. That digital economy will become 20% of GDP, surpassing the share of agriculture sector and the manufacturing sector. And AI is also becoming robust, and we will be a $400 billion, more than $400 billion AI market by 2030. So how this digitalization and AI are going to benefit the economy, to speed up the economy? We have some numbers. In 2023, the adoption of AI in the manufacturing companies was at around 8 to 10%. But after 1 year, in 2024, it was 25%. So the companies, those who are adopting the AI, they are growing much fast as compared with other companies. Their growth rate is almost double than the normally normal companies, like those companies who are not adopting the AI or the digital processes. So going forward, we are adapting the change, we are becoming robust, we are becoming resilient, but I observe three major roadblocks to the Indian economy as we are aiming for Viksit Bharat by 2047. And we have great aspirations that India should become a world economy by 2047. But firstly, we have to build our MSMEs, the resilience of our MSMEs. Most of the advanced economies or the world economies, they are more robust in their MSME sector. The contribution of MSMEs in their GDP is more than 60% on an average. In US, the contribution is more than 50%, in Europe, more than 70%. So MSMEs are more and more resilient and robust in the developed economies, but we have to support our MSMEs. As I was going through some economic survey of 2018 or 2019, that 0.49% companies in India contribute 40% of the production. So the contribution of the MSMEs should become more robust in the production processes. And we are talking about 31-32% share of MSMEs in the GDP. But the manufacturing company share is only 8%. Only 8% share of the manufacturing MSMEs comes to the GDP. So we have to support the manufacturing MSMEs particularly to create the employment opportunities for the growing young population in India. So this is the first suggestion, that we should build our MSMEs, we should connect our MSMEs with the global supply chains. And number two, there must be more and more synchronization between the policies of the central government and the state governments. Because many policies are state subjects, like the labor laws. Government announced flexible labor laws many years ago, but the states are not adopting those labor laws significantly. A few states are adopting the flexible labor law. So synchronization of policy environment between the states and central should become robust and practical to benefit the society, to benefit the people, and to benefit our growing young population. And third suggestion is a great connect between the university and industry. They should not work in the isolation, because when we interview the students, we advertise one vacancy, then more than 100 applications come, but we are not able to find a single candidate which is adequate for our requirement. So there must be more and more connect between the university and the industry for the practical purposes, because now the world is changing. We are not in isolation. We have to adopt the new technologies. We have to adopt the new innovations, and we should not be restricted to the textbooks. We should come forward to get more and more practical knowledge. So that is a great disconnect between the university and the industry. I would like to mention some observations from a study conducted by Ministry of Science and Technology. Under my supervision, I was heading that research project in 2018-19. And we mapped all the Indian states according to the university-industry linkages at the scale of 10. The maximum scale was achievement was some few states from the south, Kerala and Karnataka, some 6.3%. That too at around 60% connectivity between the university and industry. But many of these states were less than 4% at the scale of that. So there is a great gap between the university and industry that has to be built to become richer and to connect more and more growing young population with the industry, so that industry is also benefiting the research conducted by the university, and students are also benefited by the requirements of the industry, and they are able to get adequate employment opportunities in the industry. So that is and the government is now during the recent years announcing so many reforms like the internships in the industry, and there are great allocations for the internships, and they have provided 1 lakh crore funding for the research and development, for the long-term research and development by the industry. So that announcement should be very, very adaptive by the university and the students so that they are able to get the benefit of those reforms, and there must be more and more awareness about those announcements so that the people are able to get the adequate benefits.
Absolutely. Dr. Sharma, I think you made a very important point on MSMEs really empowering them, but also to the point on industry and academia collaboration. I think it's important also for the industry to come forward and build those partnerships with academia. There is a strong, again, perception within industry that we need to unlearn the kind of talent that's coming out of universities, and then only we can hire them. And the only way, I think, to address this problem is to come in early within the university ecosystem and build those. So possibly, chambers like yours and several other chambers can do this, in their capacities to encourage and build those partnerships. Professor Nag, we're talking about AI, Internet of Things, big data. It's kind of it's a big tool to empower, and it can also create its own difficult scenarios. From your perspective, if one has to create that trade resilience, where do you see India placed, and what more we can achieve through this ecosystem? We've been investing, we have made announcements in our budget for investment in the AI sector. We've been looking at several other budgetary announcements, but from a translation perspective, where do you see key opportunities?
Technology always came in the past as a complementary to the human. I mean, it is basically aimed to reduce the physical labor and so in the past, what happened is always a fear that it will reduce the number of jobs, but it never happened. This is for the first time in history that AI has really come into sphere. That large-scale unskilled jobs before. So we just heard that we need to skill. So skill, reskill, and reskill are basically the main thing. Now, where actually a country should focus, and how actually you can generate more employment. More employment will be generated only by new entrepreneurship. So every company, suppose RDA, that companies are having 100 employees working. Now, because of AI, the same company may be having only 20, right? So 80 gone. Now, what happened? Suppose earlier there were 20 companies, so 20 into 100, 2,000 people. Okay. But now what will happen? Suppose there are 500. Then what will happen? Every company will be employing only 20 people. Then actually your number of employment will go up 500, 1,000. Number of employees will go up. So focus on entrepreneurship is the most important. And that is basically the game Japan played. In Japanese factories, actually, with more automation is there. And Japan is also a world country. Right? It's a small country, but large populations as compared to Europe. So how actually they say? They say so this way that more smaller companies, and not any company needs to be international trade oriented. And that's the difference between China and India. For example, in China, the share of domestic consumption as part of the GDP is much less as compared to India, because our internal consumption is actually our main driving force. If our internal consumption growth is there, more entrepreneurship is there, then and at the same time you are able to bring AI or automation in most of the companies, then actually this problem will have a sustainable solution. What we need for sustainable solution? It's not just replacing 5 companies, only 1 company will survive in that. Maybe international trade is forcing us to do that. Because to have an international efficiency, we need to have that particular productivity. But if our domestic economy is also driving along with international trade, then this problem is. So domestic consumption should be robust, and the government must focus on increasing the domestic consumption.
Thank you, Professor Nag. In the interest of time, possibly I'll take closing remarks. I'll start with you, Professor Banerjee. What would you like, because you had this very, kind of discussion where you have touched upon a range of things. Closing remarks, if I can ask you, what would you like to see more of, and what would you like to see less of, to ensure that we achieve that resilience as an Indian economy?
I think because most of our work is in trade, I think logistics we have discussed and we know what they are. But in trade policy, what I would like to see more of is definitely India taking a more proactive stance in integrating with the global economy, and to an extent, and this is again, my personal view, sharing our fears of engaging with the world, that will also lead to greater diversification, to the point that was being made about our dependence on China coming down. Very quickly think about this. We have signed FTAs with or we are negotiating one with all the major industrial powers in the world. If I now also include US in that basket, the only country which we are not is China, and with good reason. So my MFN tariffs are largely meant, my high MFN tariffs are basically largely meant for China. So obviously I have seen these shares of others increase because I've offered them my market at much lower duties, which makes sense. And the kind of doomsday, every time we go for an FTA with another market economy like Australia, that they'll come and swamp our markets, has never come true. So we obviously have enough enormous amount of strength in our entrepreneurship, our ability to be competitive. I think we need to trust our entrepreneurs. We need to trust our youngsters who are doing brilliant work in startups and services in other areas, and we open up to the world. So I think the strategy should be that over a period of time we reduce even our MFN duties in a manner that reduces the cost of our value chains. If you look at the structure of duties in even a country like Vietnam or Malaysia, 80% of their tariffs would be below 5%, but the other 20% will be more than 30%. What does that show? That they've very focused way identified where they're vulnerable and have put very high tariffs there, but have opened up for most intermediates and raw materials which go into the value chain of the production. If I look at my tariffs, last closing point, 76% of my tariffs, MFN tariffs, are 38% are between 5 and 10%. The other 38% are between 10 and 20%. So they are neither high enough to protect me in many cases, they just add nuisance transaction costs. And if I look across these tariff lines, especially the ones where it is 5 to 10%, which is the country which is the largest share of my imports, China. So if my strategy is to open up with the rest of the world and not with China on an instant basis, then I really need to rethink my tariff strategy and engage with the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Banerjee. Final comments from you, Professor Joshi, in terms of what would you like to see more us as an Indian economy doing, and what would you like us to do less to protect ourselves from this?
I think tariffs, lot has been discussed, but I wish that we work very meticulously to make our system competitive, competitiveness in manufacturing, competitiveness in our logistics and the supply chain, and competitiveness in our the procedural aspect at the grassroots level, and simplification to the best extent possible. Thank you. Actually, let me tell you one more thing, that despite all the odds, East India Company came to India, but I just want to inform you that East India Company today is owned by an Indian.
Thank you, Professor Joshi. Final comments from you, Professor Sharma.
Thank you, Natasha. My suggestion is the implementation. Actually, we should be very practical for forming our policy environment, and there must be some illustration to how to adopt and implement that particular policy at the ground level. So that becomes crucial. That the implementation should be more and more strong, so that the benefits of that policy are percolated at the ground level. And number two, as Professor Joshi mentioned, that we have to strengthen our supply chain. Our supply chains are not that much strong. Once I was going through some numbers and I asked my research associate that please find out the most prominent 200 products which are in great demand in the world imports, world economy. Then he said, yes, sir, I will find out those products. And then he produced a list of 150 countries, 150 products, that these are the most prominent and in most economies in demand in the world economic system. Then I said, are there some products which are also produced by India and exported by India? Then he said, no, sir, these are only 40-50 products which are in this list. Then I said, find out more products which are in demand, but also produced by India and also exported by India. Then he produced a list of 75 products. They said, these are the products which are in a great demand in the world import market. And we are producing and we are also exporting these products. Then I said, what is the volume of world imports in these products? Then he said, $4 trillion. And our presence, then he said, $220 billion. We are less than 5% of global demand. But we are producing and we are exporting also. So, firstly, we have to build the capacities. And secondly, we have to connect more and more with the global markets to increase the volumes and to export more. We are producing, but we are not able to create volumes and to export more to those destination countries. I will share the study also, sir. That is, we produced that study to Honorable Commerce Minister also, and he appreciated that this is a great finding that we are producing and we are exporting also, but we are not able to connect more with the global market to increase the volume of such products. So this is my suggestion that we must be very, very practical in the formulation of our policies. There must be more and more practical approach and implementation process with illustrations. And second, we have to connect with the supply chains more strongly so that our production processes are becoming more robust and we are able to create more volumes and export more to the world. Thank you.
Just to at international level, the country should have more engagement, more discussion. So discuss, and discuss. That's the advice to the government of India. And within the country, I think we must go back to the foundation of skilling. We must start from a school education and higher education. Vis-a-vis Sri Lanka, Sri Lanka has a great school education, but the tertiary education is not. And India is exactly the opposite. Our higher education is very good, but our school education is very bad. And as a result of that, I am in this profession. When I'm seeing the students coming to us, we are finding the foundation is still very weak. They don't have any exposure. For some time now, we are hearing this buzz that why don't you just bring a financial literacy in school right now. The student must learn how to save, where to save, stock market, a bit, not much. I have seen in some other countries that at class 9 level, you cut out that who will be basically going for technical education and some vocational. Not all students need to go for becoming doctors or engineers. School can decide, parents can decide, and internship starts at class 9. So countries like Mexico, at class 12 level, I have visited few factories actually in Mexico. I found out that the factory, the class 11 and 12 students level working. So after class 12, they get dual degree, school degree, as well as one vocational degree, so they're industry ready. So they do not need to go for any diploma course for engineering or something. So 2 years they had 1 hour each after the school, they were in the factory. So once you do it, we have a large pool of skilled workers, and you must take it as a mission. If you really need to go for a Viksit Bharat, my only concern is whether the country will have sufficient skilled manpower based on the change. So that question is still unanswered because we really do not have very good policy on that.
In fact, Professor, we are actually in the middle of discussion with the Indian government on workforce mobility and how we can actually utilize the skilled professionals in India and bring them to Australia because kind of shortages that exist. So there are over 600,000 shortages just of nurses, over 500,000 shortages just of construction workers. You look at each and every sector that's actually asking for talent from abroad. But The challenge there is occupational licensing and also, mutual recognition of qualification. There's not been any pilot trials. So the government is very aspirational, but the challenges can we initiate and showcase our talent? Like, can our talent outside be that reliable? So there's a strong, we have a demographic dividend. We are human resource global leader, but how do we utilize it? And to your point, creating that skilled, capital in the country, it is working, and we are really recognized as that global talent hub for abroad. But thank you very much. This has been a very enlightening discussion, and I think the audience here also has gained good insights to this discussion. Thank you very much for your time, and hopefully we look forward to continuing this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Natasha, for navigating the conversation so smoothly. I thank all the esteemed panelists for their rich insights. I'm sure all of us have, deepened our understanding to how to navigate through economic disruptions and sparked ideas for research and policy action. Now, we will be concluding the session, and to express our gratitude towards all the panelists, I would request Professor Ashish Pandey on stage to present a memento to all the panelists, and I request our backstage team to assist Professor Pandey. Pandey, we also thank you. We also, express our gratitude to our knowledge partner, Center for Research and International Trade, for their continuous support and their contribution for making this session successful. So, and thank you to all the audience for their attention. And we are looking forward to your participation throughout the day. So, thank you. We would now conclude the session, and all of you can join us for lunch at the atrium. Thank you.